Let's now bring in Professor Kholofelo Rakubu, and the long-awaited crime stats for from April to June and July to September in 2025 have been released by the Acting Police Minister Firoz Cachalia. And according to the stats, the murder rate has dropped by 6.9% in the first period and by 11.5% in the second period. While contact crime also declined compared to last year, the rise in sexual violence continues to be a serious concern. And for more on this, let's now bring in the Professor, and she joins us now via our video link. And Professor, thank you so much for your time this evening here in SABC News. Now, let's make sense of the crime stats in which we saw today, long-awaited crime stats. And one thing I also want to point out too is the fact that as much as we've seen a decrease in the murder rates in the country, it still remains quite significantly high. I mean, 63 people killed every day, and at least from April to September, 11,500 murders in just 6 months. That's a major concern.
Good evening, and thank you for having me. A drop in the ocean, as I would always say, it's not worth a celebration because there might have been multiple factors that perpetuated that decline. And murder decline, I always say, is not a systemic change. What if there were issues pertaining to reporting or a short-term policing intervention? Because remember, crime stats normally redirect resources. Then therefore, that drop might suggest that there might have been an intervention, short-term intervention or community mobilization somewhere, but without structural reform. And that we cannot even adopt to utilize in the near future. And now this slight murder rate decline, it's overshadowed, like you said, by persistent violent and sexual crimes. But we must take note that crime is stabilizing at a high level. And it talks to multiple issues pertaining to crime response. What we picked up today, it's the structural inequalities that drives crime because of the provinces that were mentioned. And as we zoom into those provinces, and particularly with high level of contact crime, with crimes in those areas, then you understand that the causes are multifaceted, because your Western Cape and your Durban has a mix of, particularly Western Cape, a mix of socioeconomic inequalities, issues of gang activities or organized crime, and then your overcrowded urban settlement and your strained policing capacity. That is why those provinces and those police stations in certain areas were highlighted. Much anticipated, and the timing of this release comes in when South Africa is battling with the policing credibility crisis. They released in the midst of the corruption and political infiltration allegations. So now South Africans are very confused at this stage as to whether they also question, I'm sure, the validity or reliability of these crime stats because of the policing credibility. They are released at the time where it's the relationship. We know the relationship has been very volatile here and there, but this time, it is seriously cracked. Yes, has seriously cracked. And South Africans, I don't think they've well received these crime stats because they are looking forward to hearing of the systemic reforms or changes in the SAPS that will address issues of corruption and political infiltration going forward.
And Professor, you keep on alluding to the fact that crime seems to be stabilizing, and maybe if you can give us a bit of insight in terms of what would you attribute this to when you see some of the crime stats significantly dropping, particularly when it comes to issues around murder rates and contact crimes. What would you say would attribute to the numbers that we are seeing now?
Remember, there are targeted strategies like your increased patrol, your operational channelas, and some of the intelligence-driven operations. Those obviously will have certain impact wherever they are concentrated, because these crimes that suggest that these operations are mostly in your cities, and then your rural or urban areas, then your rural areas are left vulnerable. That is why lately we've had to hear of other rural communities suffering or having to experience mass shootings because a larger concentration is in the metros. But then my major interest is in the GBV battle, which we're not winning because now the crisis remains unresolved. And what I picked is that we then come up with strategies to deal with the GBV that are not married or paired with social intervention, issues of education and community support, because GBV largely requires a systemic response because it's a very complex pandemic. We have been battling with it for quite some time, and crime stats is not, you cannot utilize crime stats to pick such a personal crime. You cannot identify hotspots and so forth. So it requires a systemic response where issues of victim support and more education, issues of specialized courts, but largely dealing with your cultural issues that have tapped into the stigma around GBV reporting and so forth.
And Professor, before I let you go, just to sneak in a last question. I mean, today we saw the Madlanga Commission also touching on the issue around the disbandment of the PKTT and the evidence being presented there, talking, quite significantly around the decision that was taken to disband the PKTT. And of course, the witness there today is saying that it looked like a suspiciously calculated decision. What are your thoughts on the evidence we saw today, particularly around the disbandment of the PKTT?
Okay, today's testimony alluded to Mkhwanazi's suspicions and also clarified issues around immediate disbandment as to whether that exists in that kind of a tax team. He came in to also talk about forensic credibility and issues of political infiltration, but from his testimony, I could hear of a systemic rot, right? And how vulnerable the political killings investigations are. However, the testimony also underscores the necessity of insulating your forensic service from political influence by largely strengthening oversight and protecting whistleblowers. So if I were to sum up her testimony, he's now talking of forensic system that is politically captured, structurally weak, and operationally compromised.
All right, Professor, thank you so much for your time and for that insight.